All right, we're about to dive into a seriously dark legend, a real tale of primal horror. But here's the twist. What if the real monster isn't the one with claws and fangs? What if the true terror is the radical, unsettling philosophy behind it? Let's unravel this story, the story of a werewolf's will to power. Okay, this line right here, he was the Ubermensch they feared to become. This is the key that unlocks everything we're about to talk about. See, it comes from a retelling of a historical werewolf trial, but it flips the script. It recasts the monster as an Ubermensch, Nietzsche's idea of a Superman who gets to write his own rulebook. So he's not just some mindless beast. He's a man who found a kind of freedom that is, well, terrifying. And that paradox? That's where our story really begins. So it really makes you ask, what is a monster anyway? To get to the bottom of that, we're going to look at 3 totally different takes on the exact same legend. Each one gives us a different face of this creature: the philosopher, the alchemist, and the outsider. So on one side, you've got this deep philosophical parable, right? A story about a man who becomes Nietzsche's Ubermensch. But on the other side, it's a straight-up tale of dark magic. A guy named Peter Stump makes a pact with a demon for a powerful alchemical serum. It's wild, right? One version says the power comes from your own mind. The other says it comes from a little vial of pure evil. And then there's the third version. This one's a lot murkier. It's about a man named Silas, and it makes you wonder, was there even a supernatural monster at all? Or was this whole thing just cooked up from fear, prejudice, and good old-fashioned hysteria? Yeah, 3 stories, 1 legend. Okay, let's kick things off with that philosophical version, because honestly, it gets right to the heart of the why. Why would someone choose this? And it all revolves around one of Nietzsche's most famous and, let's be real, most misunderstood ideas: the will to power. Now, when you hear will to power, it's easy to think it's all about, dominating other people. But that's not really it. For Nietzsche, it was this internal fire, this fundamental human drive to overcome, to achieve, and most importantly, to master yourself. It's about smashing through your own limits to become the most powerful version of you that you can be, even if that version looks like a monster to everyone else. And this quote, it just nails it. In this telling of the story, Peter Stump's deal with the devil wasn't some moment of weakness. It wasn't a sin. Nope. It was a calculated, conscious choice. He looked at salvation and said, no thanks. He chose power instead because he saw it as the ultimate way to become, well, truly himself. But to really get why he'd make that choice, you have to look at what he was pushing against. Nietzsche had a name for it: slave morality. Basically, it's the value system of the herd, the majority. It's a moral code that says things like kindness, pity, and humility are the ultimate virtues. But Nietzsche argued they're praised not because they're naturally good, but because they're useful tools for the weak to hold back the strong. And here's the kicker. Stump saw right through it. He looked at the villagers and their so-called virtues, their piety, their kindness, and he didn't see strength. He saw a camouflage for their cowardice. It was all just a mask for their fear. And for him, that weakness was a cage she had to break out of to become truly, absolutely free. But how did he actually get this power? Where did it come from? Okay, let's dig into the anatomy of the beast itself and see how the 3 stories explain it, because, man, they are very, very different. And what's so fascinating here is the contrast. The alchemist story gives us something physical you can almost touch: a demonic serum, actual rune magic. The outsider story with Silas, it talks about a magical belt, and this is a huge but that only comes out after he's been tortured. Then you have the philosopher. His power, it's not in a bottle, it's not on a belt. It's forged entirely inside his own head from pure will. Let's zoom in on that alchemist version for a second. The serum wasn't just, poof, you're a werewolf. It gave him the whole package. We're talking super strength and speed, healing powers, senses off the charts, not to mention his eyes glowed like fire. And on top of all that, he got some kind of witch power, the ability to carve these magic runes that could make him invisible or just terrify you on the spot. This was a total supernatural upgrade. But in the philosophical version, all of that is just a metaphor. The real transformation, the one that mattered, happened on the inside. He wasn't just breaking the rules. He was creating his own. He was living this raw, brutal, but vital affirmation of life. He became a creature of pure, unadulterated will. So you see, his power wasn't really in his claws or his fangs. It was in his freedom, his absolute terrifying freedom from the rules that kept everyone else in line. Of course, a power like that, a freedom that absolute, well, that's a direct threat to the way things are, isn't it? A creature that lives beyond their ideas of good and evil, you just can't have that running around. So inevitably, the herd turns on him. Let's get to the downfall, the moment society finally catches up and condemns the man they've decided is a monster. And if you look at the Alchemist and the Silas stories, the pattern is almost identical. It's like a grim checklist. After a long reign of terror, we're talking 25 years, they finally launch a hunt. They corner the beast, cut off its paw, and what do you know? They later find the man, Stump, or Silas, with a missing hand. Bingo! That leads to a confession, ripped out of him through torture, and then the grand finale, a gruesome public execution designed to be a warning to everyone. And check this out. This is a really fascinating little detail from the Alchemist story. When they finally get Stump to confess, he tells them about the alchemical serum, the pact with Mephistopheles, the rune magic, and the authorities are just like, what? They can't wrap their heads around it. So what do? They translate it. They dumb it down. They take his complex, unique brand of evil and cram it into a story they already understand. A simple devil's belt. It's a classic move, right? Reduce the scary unknown thing into something familiar so you can control it. But even at the very end, the philosophical Stump is completely defiant. He doesn't beg. He doesn't repent. He faces his own execution with this proud, silent disdain, like he's looking down on the whole system that's about to kill him. He is cementing who he is right to the last breath. He lived by his own code, and you better believe he was going to die by it too. Which brings us to the big final question that all three of these stories are really pushing us toward. Was he actually a monster? Or was he something else? Something far more complicated? When you boil it all down, you're left with two totally competing verdicts. On the one hand, you have the judgment of the herd. He was a monster, plain and simple, a sinner who broke the rules and got what was coming to him. But the philosophical parable, it gives us a much tougher pill to swallow. It suggests he was destroyed not because of his crimes, but because of what he represented. He was a symbol of a freedom so pure and so absolute that they just couldn't stand to look at it. If you look at it that way, his execution had nothing to do with justice. It was all about making the walls of their own cage feel safe and strong again. Think about it. By killing the one guy who actually broke free, everyone else could go back to the comforting lie that their chains, their so-called morality, were there to protect them, not to imprison them. And that takes us right back to the question from the story of Silas, doesn't it? After everything we've looked at, you just have to ask, was the real monster the one of flesh and fang that terrorized the village? Or was the real monster something much, much more human? The monster of fear, of prejudice, of the burning desire to control everything, all just hiding behind the convenient mask of a werewolf story.